Mr. Perkins, you'll lead us off, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Mr. Noseworthy. Mr. Noseworthy, when you were Assistant Deputy Minister at the Industry Department, you served as an observer on the board at SDTC for 6 years, I understand it, until I believe you retired in 2023. Is that correct?
Sir, first, I take issue with the word observer, which I believe implies a greater responsibility than I had. I was there at their invitation to offer information and nothing further. I withdrew from the board before I retired when we first became aware of the whistleblowers' allegations.
So,
and I believe that was
so you were there at the board's invitation. So your boss at the time, for most of that time, former Deputy Minister Newbley of the Industry Department, said he insisted that you be at the meetings as his eyes and ears. So are you incorrect in your assumption, or is he incorrect in what he told the committee?
Sir, I'm not sure these things are mutually exclusive. If you take a look at the board minutes, they clearly indicate I'm there at the invitation of the board.
I will take it that
Mr.
your immediate boss, the Deputy Minister, had the correct framing of what your role was, to be his eyes and ears, because he said not all deputy ministers agreed with that approach with agencies and boards, but he insisted on that in the ones that I said. So since you were there to be his eyes and ears on what was going on, you must have had regular meetings with him about what was going on.
Mr. Chair, I spoke regularly to both Deputy Minister Newbley and Deputy Minister Kennedy when I was in my position. We carried discussion over a wide range of issues. SDCC would certainly come up when there was a matter of specific concern. With respect to Mr. Newbley, our key concerns were around the issues related to the implementation of the management action plan that came out of the evaluation of that organization in either 2017 or 2018, how to better see the organization integrate into policy on the federal side.
And then being the eyes and ears of your deputy minister in the Liberal Green Slush Fund, did you ever read the SDTC Act?
Yes, of course, sir, I did.
So then you with the clause on page 9 of the Act, on directors not to profit. It says, except as provided under subsection 1, no director shall profit or gain any income or acquire any property from the foundation or its activities. Yet we know that the Auditor General has found that 9 directors, for a total of 82% of the transactions, were conflicted when money was voted to companies they had, representing $330 million in that alone. And then, of course, there's the $59 million that the Auditor General found that they voted for companies, some of which were their own, totally outside the contribution agreements which you referenced. So I would like to know, since you read the Act and since you saw them voting for each other's companies, did you ever raise that with the Deputy Minister?
Sir, what I saw in front of me at SDTC was a regularly functioning board where people recused themselves where they thought there was a real reason to.
So I'll read it again because I don't see anywhere in the Act where it says it's okay to vote yourself property or investments if you recuse yourself. So let me read it again. Except as provided under subsection 1, no director shall profit or gain any income or acquire any property from the foundation or its activities. When tens of millions of dollars were going to directors' funds, Andre-Lise Matteau, who you watched, vote $10.7 million by her own admission, and I'm not sure what was a level of conflict that would worry you, but $10.7 million to her own companies. The number's actually higher. When you saw Steve Kuchar, when you saw Gary Ouimet vote money for their own companies and have fellow directors vote them, total of $300 million, and you were sitting there 82% of the time. They began each meeting by outlining which director and which project was conflicted. You know, my friend here, his project's up, so he's conflicted, and my director here, so he'll just get out and recuse himself. And you sat in those meetings 82% of the time when things were happening, and you never reported that to your boss?
Sir, I had no way of independently assessing conflicts of interest by the board, specifically with the interpretation that you are applying to the Act. I am not a lawyer.
Interpretation, I'll do it again. except as provided under subsection 1. That's not very complicated. No director shall profit or gain any income or acquire any property. That's not tough. You don't have to be a lawyer. Even a bureaucrat could figure out that that means you cannot vote for your own companies to receive money from the board you're on. It's against the act. You, sir, were responsible for being the eyes and ears of the deputy in that meeting. And I just don't believe that you never told them that these things were going on. Like, who are you covering up for?
Mr. Chair, I had very limited information upon which to look at issues of conflict of interest.
Said this director has a conflict, and then that director gets the money, and then the next director gets the money, and you're sitting in the meeting. What? That's not information to report back?
I had no way to independently assess, Mr. Chair. I had no way to independently assess, Mr. Chair, what holdings individual board members had or who in fact...
And voted themselves. It didn't need to be independent. It was right before you.
Thank
Were
you.
you even listening?
Thank you, Mr. Perkins. I'm sure we'll come back to...
You have 6 minutes. Thank you very much. Mr. Noseworthy, when Mr. Newbley came to the committee, your immediate superior at the time, he mentioned the fact that he wanted to know what was happening in the agencies, and he confirmed that the duty of a liaison agent was to inform the department about what was happening in the agencies. Mr. Newbley informed us that you were his eyes and ears. You attended several board meetings, including the 2 most important board meetings during COVID. You said in answer to a question that the COVID payments were not part of the contribution agreement. Can you add anything to that?
I'm sorry.
Did you see anything?
So I guess my apologies, Mr. Chair. Is the question specifically about the COVID payments?
Alors, je répète ma question.
Let me repeat my question. I have the minutes of the 2 board meetings where COVID payments were approved. You were there. COVID payments did not come under the accord. You were there at the meeting when these payments were made. Do you have anything to say about that payment, because you know the terms of the agreement?
I was aware of the decision made. Obviously, I was there. I did inform the Deputy Minister when that decision was made. I am also aware of the fact that STTC wrote the Minister at the time to inform them of that decision. The decision that was taken with great urgency and with a view that companies were in the process of collapsing. The advice that was given, which I think many now would believe is faulty, the legal advice that was provided, was that this could be done through an extension of existing contracts and that it did not create any specific issues around conflict of interest. And on that basis, I accepted that information at face value. And I did.
Attendez, Monsieur Noseworthy.
Just a minute, Mr. Noseworthy. More than $38 million were allotted to that, accorded. And without any type of due diligence being exercised, you were at that meeting. You had the agreement in hand. You were aware of it. So if the contribution agreement says that public monies has to be treated very prudently and that you were at the meeting, but you let projects be approved in a block as a group. So rather than on a case-by-case basis, that's not normal. There were a lot of projects that came under that group and came and benefited from the result. You were there at the time, and yet you said nothing.
I believe, Mr. Chair, that the discussion around the COVID payments was taken with a great deal of urgency and concern. The approach that was being taken was that the projects that were being approved were extensions of existing projects.
D'accord, mais ce n'est pas le cas, Monsieur Noseworthy, ce
Yes,
n'est pas
but
le
that's not the case, Mr. Noseworthy. And, several projects were approved at that time to the benefit of the board members. Were you misled? Did somebody say to you that it was the case when it clearly wasn't the case? Were you just a tourist in the room? You were paid. It was part of your work, was it not, to be in the room? You were the eyes and ears of the deputy minister. But now you're just saying, please, a bit more rigor in your answers. That flew in the face of the contribution agreements. So you should have recognized that.
I do not recall any discussion of specific projects. I do not
Justement, c'est ça le
recall any
problème.
discussion-
On est d'accord là-dessus. C'est ça le problème.
Precisely, that's the problem. We do agree on that. You don't recall specific projects, and the contribution agreement requires specific projects to be handled.
My understanding is that the decision that was taken by the board was the extension of existing projects that had been previously approved.
Monsieur Noseworthy, quelle était votre compréhension du rôle?
What was your understanding of your role? You were paid. You had a salary. You are a public servant. You were a public servant, and your time was paid for by the state. And so when you were there at the board meetings, you were there to work. You were the eyes and the ears of the deputy minister, as he said. So in terms of a respect of the contribution agreements, that's what you were there for. So what else was your role?
As I have since said and indicated in my opening remarks, I saw my role there exclusively as at the invitation of the board to talk about policy coordination issues and matters of that nature. I did not see my role there as having any type of policing function over the activities of the organization or its decision-making.
Je vais passer à un autre.
Move on to another subject. How long have you known Madame Vuran? How long did you know her for?
Indicated in my opening remarks, I believe I met her somewhere around 2017.
Depuis.
Since you were working, or since you were working at the IPC, Ms. Vuran received millions of dollars. There was a bioreactor. There was a project that involved that was submitted to another agency. We know that bioreactor cost $6.2 million, but your time there involved some $8 million. And do you have something to say about that? It was more than the total cost of the bioreactor.
Details of that project. I never spoke to the project or was about that project with Ms. Vuran, and I am not aware of the arrangements that were made around its financing.
Et voilà,
And nor
merci.
did I ever advocate on that project.
Et voilà, merci beaucoup.